lyrics and can rap that part, then please feel free. Sorry for the interruption. I'm just wondering if there are any answers for the CodeBat. Some answers in CodeBat are given on the website, but most of them don't have one answer. So there are no answers. If you have a question and want to go over some answers, how dare you interrupt Hamilton? Never! I must interrupt Hamilton. I'm sorry, it's a tutorial. Anyways, if you want answers, office hours. If you go to an office hours, give a coding bat question to any of the TAs when they're running it. I guarantee they will do the question. They're a great study, and if you're ever concerned, the office hours run every day but Monday. We just don't have a TA for Monday. Anyways, apologies. Okay, let's talk about the loop, shall we? In the chat, immediately above this meeting, I have posted a notebook, just like in the first tutorial. I make these notebooks genuinely so you guys can just follow along with me. They're nice and short. What you guys are seeing is Visual Studio. It's a code editor. It has a built-in extension. If you go to Jupyter, it's an official Microsoft extension. It just allows you to render Jupyter notebooks like this. You just take the file, right-click, open in Jupyter Notebook, or convert Python or Jupyter Notebook to Python. This won't always work. I've actually specifically designed this one not to work because I'm using Markdown cells. But it's a great tool. It really is. It's dark themed. It uses your Python theme, which you choose. So like if I look at this is my color scheme. So it uses my color scheme. I don't know. I just think it looks better. If you guys need me to zoom in, feel free to ask. I will be paying attention. Yeah, let's just get into it. Zooming in doesn't look great, but we're going to be talking about some more of the specifics regarding while and for loops, why you may want to use them, how to use them, when to use them. I know you guys just started recursion. That's actually in next week's tutorials. Because tutorials started a week after the course, we're a little disconnected, but most of the time we're going to be relatively close to each other. So today we're doing while loops. Tomorrow we're going to do some more complex loops. The week after that we're going to start recursion, and yeah. So let's get into it. So I've created a couple questions, 2D list to string, 2D dimensional in operator, and times tables. Times table is going to be the warm-up question, if you would think. In an assignment, this would be a practice question. We would never legitimately give this to you because it's too easy. So we're just going to write two different loops to do this times table. Now, I did a whole bunch of fancy printing. I put spaces prior to the numbers. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to print the same thing. So first we're going to do it with a while loop. And in order to do it with a while loop, we need to first initiate counters. You need some sort of I counter and J counter, or just something for rows and something for columns, because this is two-dimensional. Each one of these is the same instruction both ways, if that makes sense. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but also going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, if that makes sense. Python has a short form notation where you can actually do this, I equals J equals 0. I find this really nice. It's really short and succinct. So I'm going to do the times table only to 10, and 0 is not going to be included because it's a destructor element. So from 1 to 10, and then I'm going to need another loop inside because, from J to 10, because I do the instructions here 10 times. That's loop 1. Then I do those instructions 10 more times going down. That's loop 2. So loop 1 will print a single row. Loop 2 will then print 10 rows. So I'm going to rename I and J to be row and call, and I'm going to scroll down a bit. So while my row is less than or equal to 10, and my column is less than or equal to 10. Now in the row, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set column actually to equal 0. Or sorry, to equal 1, not to equal 0, because I am going to be that far from the side. I'm 1, I'm 2, I'm 3, I'm 4, I'm 5. And I know after my loops, you always need to increment your counters. It is always a good idea when making a loop to just go ahead outside of the loop and add the plus equals 1 or whatever it is that increments your loop so you don't have to do it in the future. Have it done for you so you don't forget. Basically, I should be able to run this cell and it doesn't infinitely loop, but nothing happens. That's always a great place to start. So in column, because I'm only going to be using print, I'm going to do print, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to do row times column. Now, in lecture today, did Nick talk about default parameters? I remember him mentioning it. Did he talk about the default parameters that come with print? Okay. He talked about default parameters. Did he talk about specifically print? Because print has quite a few of default parameters, and one of them is end. What end allows you to do is it allows you to actually overwrite whether it prints a new line or it just prints a space. So what I'm doing here is I'm printing row times column, but I'm not allowing the end to be a new line character. Instead, it's just going to be a space. So it will print the number 1, then it does a space, then it will print the number 2, then it does a space, then it will print the number 3, then it does a space. Then what I'm going to do is after I've printed every column, I'm going to then print a new line character, like so. This will force me down to the next line, in which then I want to print the row times the column, row times the column, row times, etc., etc. Does that kind of make sense? And I don't want multiple new lines, so I'm actually going to make it so when I print a new line character manually, I'm not doing it here. Or what I could do is I could print nothing and let print automatically do the new line character. Those are both way. Could you explain print \n? Yeah, I can explain \n. \n is what is officially called the new line character. What it does is when I print \n, it forces an empty line. It says, I'm done printing, go to the next line. Print by default has this as its end variable. So when I say print, by default, it will automatically throw a new line onto your string. So if I did print new line, end new line, it goes one line down. As you can see, there's the new line character right there. That highlighted in blue, that little block, that is a new line character. It's invisible to the human eye, but the computer reads it. Then there it is again on the next line saying we go here. Hence why there's an empty line space. If I remove this new line, remember the end is still by default new line. It then only happens once. There it is. Oh, there's Leyland. I'm gonna mute you since your microphone was on. But welcome to tutorial. We did get your email. We did respond to your email, so you can check that.
Thank you.
No problem. Anyways, so yeah, that's a multiplication times table with a while loop. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to the for loop? This is pretty basic when it comes to like a loop. But I want to make sure that no one's lost. Why is there an that's just manual. I could delete this and the exact same thing happens. By default, print has an end variable, and that end variable is called \n. If print \n shifts, yes, print, if I do print \n, or \n, sorry, print still appends a new line character to the end of the string. So what it actually ends up printing is this. That's why when I do this, there's an extra line of space. I didn't want that, so I just removed the \n, and it does that. All right. I'm gonna do now the exact same thing we have here, but with a for loop, so you guys can see it. So the benefit of for loops, I don't need these variables. I don't need row and call because the for loop will handle them for me. For row in range, for call in range, I don't need to worry about anything from here on out. The start and the end values will determine what row is. It will automatically increment itself. I just need to determine what is my start and what is my end. So remember how ranges work in Python. The range is a mathematical range from start to end, but end is exclusive. This is the mathematical range for Python for ranges. So if I need it to start at 1 and end at 10, I need to go to 10 plus 1. So 1 and 11. Yes, Lisa, you're correct. It should be 1 and 11 or 1 and 10 plus 1. I'm going to write it as 1 and 10 plus 1 purely so you guys can see I want to stop at 10, but I need to do this plus 1 so I actually hit it. Then it's the same thing as before. Print row times call. I'm going to override the end so that way it's a space. And then I'm going to print a new line character. How you choose to do that's up to you. It's the exact same input as before. I'm not going to beautify it. If you guys wanted to beautify it, you can very much do that. It's not that hard. You could just do if string row times call. Oops. If len of string row times call is equal to 1, then we could here, let me do this. Ans equals row times call. So I said I wasn't going to beautify it, and then I was going to beautify it. So I'm going to beautify it. If the string representation of row times column is 1 character long, if the length of it is 1 character long, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do ans equals a space, oops, plus ans. And if I run that, you'll see that, whoops, I'm still printing row times call, not ans. If I print ans now, it better aligns everything except in this final case. This final case, I would have to do if call equals 10 and len ans equals 2, ans equals plus ans. So I'm going to just put another empty space at the beginning of the answer, and boom, now it's formatted. This is optional. However, in a test, we could ask you to do logic like this. So what we could say is times table is a string variable. And what we want you to do is actually do times table plus equals the answer plus a space. And then here you would do times table plus equals a new line, because we're not printing it anymore. So I have to append that new line. And then if I printed times table, I get the exact same thing. However, now that this this is a string. It very much is a string where I could see every character. We can plug this string into the autograder and check that you did everything correct. I'm actually not even hesitating to say that you will see a question like this on the test. It might be one of the first questions, but I almost can guarantee a question like this will occur on the test whenever that is. I don't know when the dates are, but I would be comfortable doing something like this, and I would actually like try doing something like this just as a warm-up exercise. Maybe not with a times table, but something. Anyways, I'm going to move on because we need to get to two-dimensional lists. But if you guys have questions, do not hesitate to ask them. I will come back. That is 100%. I will come back to this and answer anything you guys have. So I need to talk about functions with lists as parameters. A list can be passed into a function, and you will see that a lot moving forward. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. Very commonly, we do it in tests. So I would recommend you be comfortable with that. A list can easily be saved to a variable, just like everything else. So if I have the following question, write a function which takes a two-dimensional list and generates a formatted string where the rows are separated by a tab, where the columns, sorry about that, where the columns are separated by a tab and the rows are separated by a new line. Very similar to this question up here. So let's take a look. I'm going to need a test case as well. So print format 2D list. Let's make a list. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do it kind of like a Sudoku board. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9. Very commonly, you'll see lists like this, a list of lists to represent something like a Sudoku board. And let's say I want to print it like a Sudoku board. So what I'm going to do is for parent list in ls, and then for sublist, because I know it's two-dimensional, in parent list. What this is going to let me do is it's going to let me get each of these elements as parent list. So the list 1, 2, 3 would then be set to parent list, and then sublist would be 1, 2, 3. So this would actually be element in parent list. Apologies. I should name I should choose my named variables more carefully. What I'm going to do is then we're going to use string formatting, because I know you guys all love string formatting.
Wait, sorry. Could you re-explain that, like how you define parent list and what element means?
Yeah, I can do that. So I'm going to do the list like this so you can see kind of all of the parts. So notice that it's a list. And then if I look in another tab level, because this is just more readable, every item inside the list is a list. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm getting ls, which is this entire list. I need to look at the sublists. So you can think of this as like not parent list, but sublist. ls
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
Is the big parent.
Okay.
I renamed one. I didn't rename the other because I'm dumb. Oh, you're not gonna say no. It's a simple mistake.
No, everyone does.
I'm just being a goof. Anyways, so I'm gonna use string formatting. How Nick taught you guys string formatting. Remember, if you guys don't like string formatting, you can always use an F string. I went over this in my first tutorial. The video is still available. So you can go back, watch that tutorial, and watch my explanation between an F string and a format string. So I'm going to use format strings because that's what Nick teaches. So every element is these numbers. It's the number 1, then the number 2, then the number 3, the number 4, then number 5, then number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9. So I'm then going to throw a tab character because remember the question says columns are separated by tab characters and rows are separated by new line characters. And then finally, I'm going to throw my element inside there. The element will then be put where this %d is, and you'll just print the number and then a tab. Then, now that I've printed every column with a tab, I need to print every row with a new line character. So what I'm going to do is my answer, I'm going to concatenate to the end of my answer a new line character. And then I'm going to return it. So if I run this, I get 1, a tab, 2, a tab, 3, a tab. This is totally fine. Then I get a new line character, which I don't think I can hide. Oh, yep, I highlighted it. There's the new line character. And then 4, a tab, 5, a tab, 6, a tab, and then the new line character, again, hidden, 7 tab, 8 tab, 9 tab, and then a new line character. I want to make sure that people are roughly on the same page before I go to the next question. I do want to point out this does not work on the following. Mary had like if you had anything that wasn't a number, because string.format requires the decimal tag, there is no :d. If you want a universal solution, you need to use F strings, which I don't know why Nick doesn't teach you in the course because they are so much cleaner. But this is the universal solution because the type of this variable does not matter. I have no idea why Nick doesn't teach it. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. And then it's going to be Q&A. We're going to finish nice and early so you guys will have lots of times for questions. The last question, two-dimensional in. I'm going to take in a two-dimensional list, very much like this one. I'm going to actually copy that because I like this test case. And what we need to do is we need to keep track of the indexes now, because what I want to do is I want to return a list where every item occurs. So if I have 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, what I want to do is I want to return the following list. I'm just going to make it a comment. So the first item appears in the 0th list, so it will be 0, and then is the 0th item, so it will be 0. Then the second item appears in the 1th list, the second list, because remember lists are 0 indexed, but it appears as the second item. Not second as in human, because the first, second, third. Second as in 0, 1, 2. And then finally, there's one here in this list. This was 0, 1, 2, 0, 1. So 0, 1, sorry, 2, and then 1. So this is the expected outcome. It's the tuple which represents the index of each item. I want to make sure the problem makes sense before I move forward. Because if you don't understand the problem, you won't understand the code for it. Now, looking at this, we need indexes. There are many ways to do indexes. While loops are the easiest one to do
Xenia is
indexes.
asking to re-explain the question, and I also
Yeah, okay.
second that.
Okay, so basically, let's say I have this list. I'm going to save it as a variable. ls equals that. All right. What I want to do is I want to return a list of every element 1. So what I'm going to do is if I did print ls 0, 0, this should print the number 1. If I did print, because there were 3 occurrences, 1, 2, this should print the number 1. And if I did 2, 1, this should print the number 1. That's what I want to basically do. So 0, 0 is this one, 1, 2 is this one, and 2, 1 is this one.
So like the first number specifies which sublist,
Yeah,
and
which
then the second
sublist.
number specifies which location in the sublist.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
It's a hard question, but there is no good way to word this. You know? So I'm going to comment that out. So how do we want to do this? Well, so row column. Yeah, it's very much another row column situation. Except we need to know the numbers. With for loops, your first instinct should always be for item in ls. Like your first instinct is to always just for loop over the list because you have that power. But you don't keep track of the index. So you have 2 options, and I will show you both options in this tutorial. Option A is to use something called enumeration, which is much harder. Option B is to use length, range and length, which is what you guys are already accustomed to. So for every row in the length of ls, and then for every column in the length of row, or whoops, in ls at row, I'm going to take list 0 and I'm going to get the length of this list, and that's my column number. And the row is just the length of, or how many sublists there are. And then what I'm going to do is if ls at row call is equivalent to whatever element I pass in, I added this to the parameter list because I forgot to actually include it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do answer dot append row column. When I run this, whoops, I need to actually look for an item. So I'm going to look for the number 1. I'm gonna make this a 1 line so that way I can see. Ah, I did say this is called the length range method, and yet I didn't type the word range. Because yeah, length returns an integer number. I need it to be a range so that way the for loop can actually use it. So length gets the length of the list. In this case, 1, 2, 3. There are 3 sublists, and deletes this and returns 3. Then range will build me a list 0, 1, 2. So I need to use range because for row in 3 makes no sense. Like 3 what? You need some sort of actual iterable data. And it's the same thing here, except it's this sublist. It doesn't matter what the length of ls is, it matters what the length of the sublist is. Does that make sense? And how I screwed it up? I'm just going to give people the actual ability to type. And I did mention there was a second way. I'm going to explain the second way real quick, but first I've got to make sure that people have the ability to actually tell me, nah, you screwed that up too much. Do it again. Explain append. Yeah, I can explain append. You have a list. Answer is a list. Append takes the list and adds to it. Answer.append is the exact same as saying answer plus equals this. These two lines are exactly equivalent. If you are more comfortable with plus equals notation, then what it will do is it will take whatever your list was and concatenate an element to the end. It is up to you guys to pick whatever notation. I find append always the more comfortable option of the two. Like I said, though, there's a second way to do this, and I'm going to show you the second way. So I'm going to copy this. The second way focuses on something called enumeration. Enumeration is the concept of you want the list item and you want the list index. So if I take the enumerate function and I pass in ls, it will return two items that I can loop. It returns the actual sublist, and I save that as row, and it returns an index variable, which I will call I. And I'm gonna rename row to be sublist purely because it's a bit unreadable otherwise. I'm gonna do the same thing for the second loop. And I'm gonna maintain that constant naming of sublist and element. Except what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use sublist right here. And now what I can do is I can actually say if element is equal to E, whatever my search item is, and I know I and J, they're saved as variables just the same, I'm going to append I and J. This is a much shorter way to write it. Like if I comment this out and run the code, it still does the exact same thing, but enumerate is a much more complex thing than you guys have ever had to deal with. If you understand how it works, feel free to use it. It's genuinely really helpful. But if you don't understand how it works, you do not need to know how to understand how it works. You can use the range length method. And that's the end of my tutorial. That being said, we still have like 20 minutes. And that's mainly because you guys likely have questions. No one can explain everything perfectly. So any questions, go ahead.
I think this is something I'm like maybe fundamentally not understanding, but when you say like element, how does how does the computer recognize what that is?
So this is more of a, let's take a look at actual just for loops. So if I have for something in and I pass in a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is a variable, whatever I want to call it. I could call it element, I could call it item, I could call it number or num. It's a variable that I want to use. This notation, so if I did if I had a basic sum loop, Python will see the for loop and will go, okay, so what you actually mean is s equals 0. Whoops, I'm just gonna do a quick thing here. Python will go, oh, you have s equals 0, num equals 0, while num is less than length 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, s plus equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Python rewrites literally everything word for word, and then num plus equals 1. So you can see Python pulls this list and says, all right, I'm going to put you here, and I'm going to put you here because the variable num was used.
Right. So no matter what you could use num, you could use element, you could use like
Yep.
I don't know, item, and like just because
Bobby Joe.
Right. And just because it's surrounded by for and in and then a list, like it knows that you mean like
Yep.
this is a
the
variable that right, and it refers to like, oh, each like successive item in the list.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I think I get that.
So this gets rewritten to be the index in the list of the item you want to pull. So Bobby Joe starts as element
Right.
0 and then gets the 0th element from the list. Then Bobby Joe will increment to 1 and gets the first element from the list. Then it will increment to 2, get the second element from the list.
Okay.
Python does all this for you automatically, though. This is why people love for loops more than they do while loops, because this is a lot shorter than this. But both of these do the exact same thing. If I do print s here and print s here, I should get the exact same answer, 21 printed twice.
Yeah, I think I get that.
You guys have me for like another 20 minutes. If you do not want to be here, you do not have to be here. You are free to go. Assignment 2 Q3C. Yeah, sure, I could do assignment 2 Q3C. So fun fact, the assignment due date is over. Actually, I don't know if I can cover the exact question. I might be able to talk about it. I can explain it, but I don't think I can actually give a solution to it. And that's mainly because SAS students, they don't implicitly get an extension, but they can email Nick and request an extension. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But so I can't cover the solution to this yet, mainly because SAS extensions are, I believe, an additional 3 days. But I can look at the question, I hope. So let's pull up the question. I just downloaded this straight off of the what's it called? Avenue to Learn. So you want to look at question 3C. Question 3C. Who plays the most pinball in a given month? Okay, this question, I don't think I even need to not say the answer explicitly because this is pretty obvious. Take a look at these test cases. If you look at it, each test case is Inky, Blinky, Pinky, Clyde. Inky plays 7, Blinky plays 8, Pinky plays 7, Clyde plays 9. Same general test case, similar thing, Clyde still plays the most. It is pretty easy to see that no matter the situation, Clyde will be the person who plays the most. So all you would do is you would uncomment Clyde and just simply answer that. Does that make sense?
Speaking of the assignments, I was wondering like how/when the grades get released.
Okay, so grade cannot be released before every student has had their chance to submit. So every student has to have the opportunity to finish the assignment on their own before the grades get released. Because if you know you have 100%, you could go to someone who has an extension and give them answers. immediately upon like everyone being submitted, I download
Right.
every assignment. Like I literally download it by hand. I can actually show you the like I download a zip file with all of your assignments. I upload it to the AutoGrader server and I just literally say this student submitted this student submitted this student submitted this. All right, AutoGrader, tell me what they got. And it objectively gives me how many test cases you passed and how many you failed, and that determines your grade.
Right. And then like if we submit on Jupyter Hub versus if we submit on Avenue, does that impact how like we receive the like what platform the grade comes out on?
Nope, the grade always comes out on Avenue.
Oh, okay, got it.
Jupyter Hub, we only use it as an auto grader, like as a way of collecting your submissions and grading them automatically. We do not release grades on that because it's not the platform designed to do that, if that makes
Right.
sense.
And then either on Jupyter, sorry for all the questions about, but
No, hit me.
Whether like let's say on Avenue, if we resubmit, would you just download our most recent submission?
Yes, Avenue will automatically delete your prior submissions for us
Okay,
when we go to
perfect.
download them.
Okay,
And
great.
it's the same with Jupyter. It will delete
Okay.
whatever you had before and submit what you currently want.
Okay, cool.
I had a question about just like logistically, because I remember in like an earlier lecture, you guys mentioned that the lowest assignment grades would be dropped.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was just wondering like how many of the lowest? Is it like two, the two lowest, or
Nope,
is it just
one.
the lowest? One? Okay,
You
perfect.
get one free assignment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you guys have one free assignment. You have one MSAF for the entire semester. So technically speaking, you could choose to do only 8 of the assignments and still get 100%. Now that being said, I do not advise ever using the MSAF for an assignment. That is a waste of an MSAF. Save it for a test because this course only has one test actually. So maybe even MSAFing the test isn't a good idea because if you MSAF the test, your final exam becomes what, 60%? I think the final exam would increase weight to 60%. Yeah. So how you choose to use your MSAF is actually a little bit iffy this year because usually this course has 3 tests. So if you MSAF one of the tests, basically nothing is lost because the percentage just gets split in half and put on the other 2 tests. Each assignment is worth 4% in the end, however. The test is worth 20%. So you've really got to ask yourself, what's the best way to spend it?
One more question about kind of like assignment submission. Let's say that like for whatever reason, you ended up submitting both on Jupyter and Avenue, maybe because you were frazzled. And like let's say, for example, your Jupyter submission, you think you messed it up. Would it still be okay? Like if your Avenue submission went through, all right?
The way it works is we collect on Jupyter first and then go to Avenue and collect on Avenue. Then the Avenue submission overwrites whatever you had on Jupyter.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
So if you submit it on both and you have
Yeah.
improvements, I recommend emailing a TA and letting them know I submitted on Avenue and on Jupyter. The one on Jupyter is the one I want to be graded, and we can manually delete that and go back into Jupyter and get your submission.
Yeah. I think for me I think the Avenue was the one I wanted. Yeah. I was just like confused with how to submit, but I think I figured it out now. So thanks.
My always recommendation is if you can use Jupyter, Jupyter is the most convenient, go ahead and use it. If you struggle for any reason, immediately abandon Jupyter and just go to local. The local at least has the benefit of guaranteed working. Jupyter is finicky. Don't rely on it if you don't have to.
Oh, and also like for the Avenue submissions, it's literally just like submitting like any other assignment for any other course, right? Like you
Yep.
just upload it and then okay, cool.
Yep. Upload, it's the .ipynb file.
Yep, don't rename.
Yep. We download that, put that in a folder marked with your Mac ID, and that's your work. Got 5 more minutes. That's 5 more minutes of questions anyone can ask. Considering you guys just covered recursion, I'm surprised no one's asked me to cover anything regarding recursion.
Sorry, can you go over like a simple example of how to use a dictionary?
Ooh, dictionaries. That's a fun one. Let me pull up a Visual Studio Code again. I closed down the code because we were getting a lot of administrative questions, so I didn't think I was going to need it. Apologies. Share screen. Screen 2. Can my screen be seen? So, what's a good way to cover some dictionaries? Here's a good way to cover some dictionaries. Let's talk about the bonus question. I know I shouldn't be doing it, but I'm just going to do it because I'm a merciful guy. On assignment 2, there was a bonus question where you would look at the string, hello world. You would look at it in 3-character chunks and determine if that string appears within or that substring appears in the entire string more than once. So when I look at HEL, does HEL appear in the string more than once? When I look at ELL, does it appear more than once? So if I said hello, hello, well, HEL appears twice. See how I can highlight it here, and my Visual Studio Code even recognizes that it appears again, so it highlighted it there. That's what this question was actually based off of. And one of the solutions was using a dictionary. Occurred equals, I'll call it occurrences equals dictionary. It's going to be an empty dictionary, of course, because we haven't had any occurrences yet. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop over, and I'm going to use for loops because I like for loops. I'm going to loop over every character in the string, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, starting at index I, going to index I plus 3, that's going to be my key. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the dictionary. There's a error, actually. I have to do -3 because there's a index out of bounds error. Apologies. So for every key from I to I plus 3, I'm going to take that key and I'm going to go if occurrences at key, then I'm going to immediately return false, or in my case, print boring because this isn't a function. Else, what I'm going to do is occurrences at key equals true. So what this example actually does is the occurrences dictionary with every loop will gain a string HEL and put it to true. Then on the next loop, it does ELL and put it to true. Then it does LLO and put it to true. Then it does blah, blah, blah. It does LO space, puts it to true. It does O space H, puts it to true. Puts space HE, puts it to true. However, then we get to this case here. It sees HEL again. Now, my key is in the dictionary. I don't even have to call it occurrences at key. I could do key in dictionary, whatever the dictionary is called. So it's occurrences. What matters, though, is this string has already been seen inside my dictionary. Is that a fun example? Because it's not only an example of like how dictionaries work, because it's an array, but with a custom index. you could simply call this 0, 1, whoops, 1, 2, 3, and literally what you have created here is the exact same as this. Because this is just an array. It's an array with index 0, 1, 2, 3, and the value stored true. So if I did 1, 2, 3, 4, this is the exact same as this. Dictionaries are only lists, but you can customize the index of which you pull the item, if that makes sense. Considering this was a student question, I do need you to tell me if that makes sense.
Yes, that does indeed make sense. Thank you.
And yeah, this is the only reason I like this example, because this is not only a example that directly occurs in an assignment, but this was the intended solution that we wrote for the assignment. So if you did something like this on the assignment, you can pat yourself on the back because you guaranteed yourself a free mark. And I'm just going to run the code. It prints boring. Prints boring twice actually, because there are multiple duplicates. There's HEL and there's ELL. Now technically it should print boring for this as well, so there should be 3. I think it's my index should just be this. This will key error if you do occurrence. It shouldn't key error. I just proved it doesn't key error actually. If key in occurrences, and then the else statement adds the key to the dictionary of occurrences and sets it the value to true. Yes, the original one did. Yeah, if occurrences key would key error. Can you explain why you did -3? -3 was because you've got to be careful with the length of the string. This string is 11 long. If I at all had like 11, I cannot do S11 because that's an error. Print S11 will error because there is no S11. The index is out of range. I need to subtract it to make sure that this I plus 3 is never greater than the length of the string. That's why I did the -3. However, it should be -2 because remember, range does -1. It is so annoying. So what I wanted to do is -3 plus 1. Strange as it is, the for loop is horrible. Everyone hates for loops specifically because of this +1 dependency. I hate them because of that +1 dependency. However, I've managed to justify it in my head and I let it happen. Most good languages have a better for loop where it's for I equals 0, I less than 10, I plus plus. This is what most languages define a for loop as. It's just a while loop. Like it's a horribly disguised while loop. But Python had to be a special snowflake. Yes, I agree. Python for loops are atrocious because the Python for loop is a misnomer. It's a for each loop. Python's for loop is not a for loop. It is a for each loop. Under that assumption, it's not egregious, but only under that assumption. And for those of you who stuck around because you were interested in hearing that discussion, a for each loop is something you will never see because Python doesn't have it. A for each loop is what Python does. You have a list of items, item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, item 5. The for loop, what I showed you, the C-style for loop, is actually a for loop. They're called different things. Python, however, hates C, even though it compiles to C, and said, you know what? Well, I'm not going to do that, and decided to be special. I can rant about all of the stupid decisions that Python has made, and it's not even the worst language in my opinion because Java still exists. I'm sorry, I hate Java. I could go into literally a 3-hour rant about Java. Thank you, Mark.